participating in this chat and learn is because September is International Update Your Resume Month. No, that is not something I made up. That is something that comes to you from the Career Directors International. They launched this campaign years ago as a way to really help connect career coaches, resume writers with job seekers and encourage them to reflect, to update their resumes and prepare for the next step in their career. So the reason I reached out was to really hone in on September is Update Your Resume Month. So what we're going to be talking about today is really the top reasons to keep your resume updated, when to be updating your resume, and the real big theme is going to be how to quickly target your updated resume for the jobs that you want rather than the jobs that you've had, which is a very common theme that I see with job seekers and often the source of the disconnect between why they're not landing the interviews that they want.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And so what a perfect time to reach out and share your knowledge today. So thank you for being intuitive there, Steph.
Absolutely.
I know that you've got a beautiful presentation to share before we roll into the live Q&A. So I just want to remind folks who are joining us live, we will get to the live Q&A after Steph's presentation. If you have something that comes to mind during the presentation, just go ahead and write those questions or reflections in the chat box, and we'll try to find time at the end to go over those. And then she might actually hit on some of these questions as she's going through the slides. So just make sure you give us your presence there. And with that said, let's start with this first slide here. And Steph, I'll just take your cue to move on to the following slides.
Absolutely. So I want to start with the top reasons to update your resume. And the reason is really, I run across people all the time that say that the reason they put their resume on the back burner, the reason they struggle is they hate talking about themselves. It is such a reflective activity that sometimes can make us feel very not so motivated, not so confident in ourselves. And a lot of that comes from just the wrong perspective of looking at your background. You've probably heard the saying, being too close to the story and needing someone else to kind of see the value that maybe you've overlooked. And that tends to happen a lot. But what I want to start with is really, besides needing to move forward and needing to find a new step in your career, we often find ourselves stuck and in different situations that really make it difficult to move forward in not just resume writing, but in our careers in general. So some of the reasons that you should really consider updating your resume, we'll start with number one, and that's because you realize that your employer undervalues the work that you do. And I see this a lot with clients who say, they're definitely not top of mind when the time comes to fill higher level roles. And they find that those roles are often given to newly hired employees instead. That's a clear indicator that your employer undervalues the work that you do. And it's a great time for you to update your resume, a great reason to update your resume, because there are things that you may not realize that you bring to the table because of how you're treated in the workplace, or maybe not directly treated, but just the overall environment and culture of that workplace undervaluing what you do. That's a great reason to update your resume. Another is you've realized that a clear path for advancement can't be defined for you by management. And what this often looks like is maybe you've made requests for additional training or responsibilities, and those requests are rejected or just ignored altogether. I've actually seen this happen with a friend of mine in almost every job that they've held, and they want so badly to move forward. They need the help, they need the training, they need the certifications, and they're given these promises when they take the job initially, but it never happens. And that's a really good reason to update your resume. I don't know if I should be doing the finger pistols.
I love it. No, I think let's try with that, because I was looking and I like that.
I was like, hey, there we go. Next slide, please. All right. So the next reason you should highly consider making the time to update your resume is when you realize that your motivation and self-confidence is dwindling. Now, resume writing, as I mentioned before, can sort of add to this in a lot of ways because you're looking at your background from, really a narrow perspective. But what I'm talking about more than anything is in the workplace. If you've noticed that your motivation and your self-confidence is dwindling, that is going to negatively impact the next steps that you take in your career so much. And And really what this looks like and what it will likely look like for you if you find yourself in this place is that those challenging tasks that were a little more difficult for you when you first started, they're becoming repetitive. You aren't learning anything new. You're feeling stagnant. That's really when it's time to reevaluate what you've done, where you see yourself next, and are you on track with your 5 year plan and really what the next step in that 5 year plan looks like. And then the last reason to update your resume really stems from realizing that there are changes outside of your control brewing at the company. This may look like the company has just completely stopped growing. And I've seen this happen quite a bit where, there are, especially in startups, where they're just go, 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 hustling, trying to grow, trying to expand. And then all of a sudden it goes flat. There's nothing new on the horizon. There's nothing really being pushed forward, and it just feels stagnant in the company itself. You may also see this when the company's acquired or restructured and you notice that others are jumping ship. That's a really good reason to update your resume because you just don't know what is happening behind the scenes and how that may trickle down and impact you and your role. All right. So, when it comes to when you should update your resume, spoiler alert, it's not when you're asked for your resume and it's not when it's time for a new job. There are several different points throughout the year you should be making time to update your resume. And it doesn't need to take a long time. It's just a few minutes of reflection, a couple minutes of additions or changes, and that's it. It shouldn't feel very daunting to have to update your resume, especially when you aren't exactly planning a new job search or you're not in a job search, you're just being prepared. So, one of the number one times I recommend updating your resume is 3 to 6 months after starting a new job. I see this all the time, especially with my clients. We update their resume, it looks great. I don't hear from them again for years when they're ready to apply for a new job, and they haven't even added their most recent role to the resume. Now, I recommend waiting 3 to 6 months. And the reason is you want to give yourself time to really familiarize yourself with your new role, to understand what's expected of you, and even give yourself some time to make some contributions toward achieving some goals for the department, the team, the organization as a whole. Give yourself a little bit of time. You don't need to dive right in and add a one-liner to your resume as soon as you land that job. Give yourself some time, then go in and update it. Another time you would want to update your resume is when you've completed a major project. This happens all the time with my clients where they come to me and they've had this really great experience, this really great project, but it was 5+ years ago and they can't remember details about it. They can't even remember, who was involved in the project. And that's a problem because then you're really not going to be able to showcase that as an achievement on your resume, especially if you were able to meet a goal or, generate some kind of big results. So once you finished a major project, reflect on it. What was my contribution? Was I a leader? Was I an independent contributor? What were my responsibilities? What was I able to achieve? Did I meet any milestones? Did I, impact a certain amount of people? Impact the time frame in which it was completed. Definitely think on these things, even if it gets really lengthy and really detailed. Those details will help you with updating your resume and targeting it for other opportunities down the road. So when you've completed a major project, make sure to take the time to update your resume. Another time is when you finish a certification program. Too often, we're doing additional training, some online courses, certification programs, formal training programs, leadership development programs, and they never make it onto the resume. So, whenever you finish something where you've boosted your skills, you want to make sure to add that to the resume. Now, another good time to update your resume is December or January, and I'm also going to add in September on that list as well. But I do lean towards December, January, because this is the time of year where we're very reflective. We're thinking back on our year, what we've done, what we maybe haven't done, and are a little disappointed that we didn't actually achieve like we wanted to. And then we start setting goals for the next year and really breaking down, what steps we need to take to make changes in our lives. So December, January, end of the year, great time to do this. But September is also a great time to do this because we're getting out of summer. We're out of that fun in the sun mode. We're starting to think, okay, maybe I'm not so happy where I'm at in my current employment. Maybe I should start looking elsewhere. Often, what happens is at the end of the year, hiring starts to ramp up again. And so this is a really good time to have your resume ready to go in case, internally they're looking to make some promotions to bring in some newer employees to fill in some of those roles. So being prepared even for a potential promotion with an updated resume is really important. And then lastly, when your career goals change. Now, when your career goals change, your resume should change with it. And we're going to talk more about that in the next section. But essentially, what we're talking about here is you want to make a change, your background needs to be tweaked to really showcase that you're ready for that change. But waiting to the last minute to think about these things and to start researching how to go about those changes, whether there's skills gaps that you need to fill or whether there's, new requirements that you don't even know you would need for that type of a career move. This is the time to update your resume, find those gaps, pursue opportunities to fill those gaps, and have that updated resume ready to go when you are ready to apply for a new opportunity. So, whatever you do, don't wait until you're asked for your resume or are in a position where you really need a new job ASAP.
And it's like you're clearly preaching to the choir because we've got folks already writing in the chat box. Someone writes 14 years between resumes would have helped if I'd updated it a bit more frequently. So I'm
Oh,
definitely,
absolutely.
yes, I definitely think that I've fallen into that as well. What is it that you think keeps us, I don't know if you want to call it stuck, but just not keeping up with that regularly?
We as people in general hate talking about ourselves, hate writing about ourselves. Um, I know even as a writer, I I actually haven't updated my own resume in a while, mostly because I don't really need to. But I did it as an exercise a couple years ago, and it was hard. And I found it like I'm way too close to my own story, and I really struggled with it. And I did decide if I ever did want to go back into corporate America, I would definitely hire a resume writer to do mine, just because I am way too close to the story, and I hate talking about myself. I absolutely, I'm a face of my company, and I hate having to like sell and that's really what you're trying to do with your resume is sell yourself in a lot of ways. And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people. Even the most arrogant people tend to be the ones that do great in an interview. They can talk about themselves, but when it comes to getting it on paper, it's a whole different thing and just very stressful, very overwhelming. And there's a lot of doubt behind it. I mean, a lot of self doubt, whether you sound like you're arrogant, whether you sound boring, whether you sound, even worth hiring. And it does really impact how we think about ourselves.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Well, we're encouraging everyone to not take that route, even though we've all fallen culprit to that, and to try to showcase ourselves the best way. I mean, the word sell too is always like, I don't want to sell my soul, but how do we showcase our talents and our gifts and the time and energy that we want to give to a certain organization or company. So I love just like the play on words also helps to just reimagine the way that we write about ourselves.
Very true.
Jason writes in the chat box that it hits so close to home. It's exhausting to keep looking and criticizing myself. Then I have to oversell myself. Absolutely.
Oh, and even beyond that, the rejection, or I won't call it rejection because it rarely is actually rejection, but it feels like rejection when you're spending all this time, kind of like Jason said, critiquing yourself and evaluating and then trying to describe yourself, and then you don't land the interview. And it just feels so deflating. Like, well, okay, clearly I'm not good enough then. When really that's not even what's happening most of the time. So it's definitely a taxing thing. A lot of people don't realize, I remember for years, people like, you're a resume writer, people pay you to do that. I'm like, it is not a pleasant experience for most people. And most people find it way too difficult to really look at themselves objectively and strategically and put it on paper in a way that's going to resonate with how employers, hiring managers, and recruiters are going to respond very positively to.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to this next slide here.
Yeah. All right. So, an updated resume versus a targeted resume. So, we're going to start talking about what an updated resume looks like. And it doesn't have to be, starting from scratch, a brand new document. What we're talking about is really making sure you have current contact information. And what this looks like is your city, state, and zip location for the United States. And the reason is for applicant tracking systems. So I'm going to start spilling a little bit of insights here throughout this section, especially about applicant tracking systems, which tends to be a very ambiguous tool being used in hiring, but it's not as, it's really not as bad as it sounds. So for applicant tracking systems, you want to make sure to have a city, state, and zip location for the United States, even if you're applying for remote roles. And here's the reason why. Applicant tracking systems tend to use a radial distance from a geographic location for search, sort, and filter settings, even if they're remote roles. And so when you omit your location altogether, you won't appear in those search results, sort results, filter results at all because it's omitted. If you add it and you're not in that geographic location, but it's an in-person location, for example, a good thing to indicate is that beneath that geographic location that you are willing to relocate to city state zip or anticipating relocation to city state zip. So it's still included in your resume, but you're letting them know this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be next. And again, I can't encourage it more for remote roles as well, because you just don't know how the person behind the applicant tracking system is using it. And if they're asking for it in an application, there's no reason it can't be on your resume as well. You also want to make sure to have one primary contact phone number. So get rid of that evening versus day phone numbers, get rid of that landline versus cellular. Some people still are doing that, and you've got to make it as crystal clear as possible for them to contact you. Don't give them multiple numbers, just give them one. Make sure you have a voicemail set up, and make sure that you can accept voicemails, because I can't tell you how many times even I've tried to contact a client and their voicemail box is full and they can't even find out that I tried calling them. So make sure you're doing these things, little minor housekeeping type things for your job search, especially when you're updating your resume. And then another thing would be a professional email address. This may be the time to update your AOL or Yahoo email address. I hate to tell you this, there is a lot of bias in the job search, and one of those is your email address. I hate to say it, but it is so true. A Yahoo or AOL email address is a clear indicator that you are over 45, sometimes even over 50 years old. It is free to create a modern email address using a more current and up-to-date and modern email provider like Gmail or Hotmail. So this may be the time to make a more professional email address and add that to your resume. Now, an updated resume also should summarize your typical tasks. And I can't emphasize the word summarize enough. Your resume should not primarily be tasks and responsibilities. It should summarize those for some keyword optimization, especially for that applicant tracking system. You want to make sure that, you demonstrate that you can do what they need you to do in the role, but make sure you're summarizing, make sure you're focusing on the details that matter to the employer you're reaching out to. You don't need to add every single detail about what you've done on a day-to-day basis. I think the best comparison I've ever heard is your resume should be like a sales page, not a Wikipedia page. You don't need to add every single detail. You want to make sure to highlight your top selling attributes, and we'll talk about more about that in a moment. But you also want to summarize those contributions that you've made toward achieving goals. This is far more important than typical tasks, and we'll talk more about figuring out what exactly that means and what that looks like in a moment. But also adding in those key accomplishments for the roles that you've held over the last 10 to 15 years. So I know one of the top questions is, how much experience should I be putting on my resume? Now, for most roles, 10 to 15 years max. Anything beyond that draws negative attention to your age. I hate to say that, but it's true, especially if you've got dates in the 90s still on your resume. You are drawing attention away from your qualifications and in a negative way toward your age. So employers really only do look at the last 10 to 15 years, usually only the last 10 years. Think about it this way. When did you last look at a job posting and notice that they're looking for over 15 years of experience in any particular skill set? It's very, very rare. Mostly for executive level roles will you see 15 plus years of progressive leadership experience. But beyond that, they're really not looking for that much more. And the reason is because, technology changes. Best practices change, laws change, rules and regulations change. And what applied to your career 15 plus years ago likely is not relevant anymore. So keep the focus on the last 10 to 15 years, especially when you're not needing to have more than that experience listed on your resume. So when it comes to targeting your resume, quickly targeting your resume, because I know often it sounds very time consuming to have to tailor your resume for every job application. If you're applying for jobs online, you definitely need to be reworking your resume for every application, because that resume is going through applicant tracking systems and they are looking for something very specific to be able to put your resume in front of hiring decision makers. So let's simplify this. When it comes to targeting your resume, you just need to ask yourself these three questions. What are the top goals of the role? What keywords will ATS be looking for in an ideal match? And what are the top desired skills and abilities for the role? So we're just condensing it down to these three questions. So we're going to start with what this looks like in your resume, and then I'll be sharing some additional resume tips in with this as well. All right, so we're going to start with the top goals of the role that you're pursuing. So I know in some of the questions, the Q&A, we were talking about, or I was asked about career summaries or objective statements. So let's talk about that a little bit. So an objective statement used to say, I'm seeking gainful employment where I'll be able to advance in my career. That tells an employer absolutely nothing about what you bring to the table. So you want to make sure to nix outdated, self-serving objective statements. What's that leave you with? Well, there's resume summaries or career summaries. And the problem with most resume and career summaries is they're regurgitating information that's already on the resume. So, what we want to do instead is create something that is going to really position you very quickly, that top third of your resume, position you very quickly as the best fit for that particular job. So what I want to encourage you to create instead is a branding statement. A branding statement is going to focus more on the goals of the role that you're pursuing. So here's an example of what that might look like. For a project manager, their career summary might start with project manager with 10 plus years of experience managing complex IT projects. What a branding statement would start with would be more of project manager with 10 plus years of success meeting project deadlines, budget constraints, and quality standards for deliverables. See what I did there? It's much more goal oriented than this is what I can do. This is what I can do for you. And it's a different way to look at your background. And it's a different way to present yourself as I can do what you need me to do in this role. And I can do that because I understand the goals. And these are not always very crystal clear in a job posting. So here's my little quick tip. Look for statements that start with the word to. So for an accountant, for example, an accountant job posting may say reviewing financial statements to minimize tax liability. So the task that you're doing has a purpose, and it's that purpose, that goal that you really want to emphasize in that top third of your resume. So a branding statement, very similar to a career summary or resume summary, should be no more than 4 to 6 lines, a brief paragraph, just a couple statements about what you bring to the table, and really focusing in on those top goals of the role that you're pursuing. That should take you no more than a few minutes to quickly update for each application, especially if you're applying for the similar roles. You shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel every time. The goals of the roles, especially if they're similar roles, should be very similar in themselves. The terminology might be a little different, but it shouldn't take you too long to integrate these elements into your resume. So then what keywords will ATS be looking for in an ideal match? As a reminder, ATS stands for Applicant Tracking Systems. This is the software that employers are using to collect resumes and narrow down applicants to the most qualified candidates, and only those top ranked candidates will likely be called for an interview. So what we're doing here is, again, not reinventing the wheel, because the great thing about applicant tracking systems is there are so many different types. They are all used very differently. And then there's the human element. Recruiters and hiring managers are going to use different applicant tracking systems differently. So you don't need to stress so much about getting it right and really trying to beat the bots. That's really not what you're trying to do. You just got to understand how it works and what it's looking for. So what applicant tracking systems are typically looking for are the heaviest weighted keywords that are typically found in the job posting. And these will either be position titles. So, if you've held the title that you are applying for in the past, that will definitely help. But then also the noun form of skills and experiences. So for our project manager example, Project management would be a very heavily weighted keyword that should be found in your resume. Make this simple on yourself by having a key skills or areas of expertise section where you can swap out these keywords very quickly and make sure that especially those heaviest weighted keywords, the ones that are going to be the most job related, are integrated into that section. And it's also great for a quick skim. Once that recruiter's looking at your resume, they can find those. That signals to them what they can expect from the rest of your resume. So that's something that should also take just a few minutes to do. And I'd really emphasize looking at that qualifications or requirements section before you look at duties or other summary paragraphs in a job posting. Just because, again, the way applicant tracking systems work is it's not looking for verbatim everything in the job posting. It's looking for these heaviest weighted keywords. All right, so then the third question is, what are the top desired skills and abilities for the role? So it's not enough to just say you have experience or that you have project management as a skill. You'll likely notice in the job posting that, especially under those requirements or duty section, or not duties, the requirements or qualification section, that it'll say, experience in managing complex IT projects. Well, if your resume doesn't have examples of you managing complex IT projects, you're not helping yourself. You're not presenting yourself as the best fit for the job. So what I really want to encourage you to do is create these micro stories that really demonstrate the skills and abilities that you have in action. What that means is, again, storytelling. What did you do? What resulted? Why was it necessary? Give some context behind it. And those results are what will be the really great achievements that you'll use bullets to really pop on your resume and draw attention to, especially from a rater who's skimming the actual document. Those bullets with those really strong achievements that emphasize, the goals that you met, the before and after of the efforts that you made. That's what's going to help you stand out in all the right ways on your resume. Now, when I say micro stories, you may be thinking, that sounds like a lot of work. That's the bulk of my resume I'm redoing. Again, if you are applying for similar roles, these shouldn't change too often. They should be very similar. You may need to swap one or two bullets out. You may need to just change, the emphasis in one of those bullets just to better match what they're looking for or a specific skill that they're looking for. But this really shouldn't take you more than a few minutes to be able to do for different applications. And again, I'm emphasizing online applications. If you are networking and you are passing along your resume to people within your network, you don't necessarily need to stress so much about how targeted it is. Yes, you want to make sure that your message is targeted, that you have a clear indication of what you bring to the table, what role is your ideal next role. And, that shouldn't have to change for every opportunity if you're leveraging your network, but making sure that your message is crystal clear, that you know what your ideal next role is, that you understand what the goals of those roles are. That is what is going to help you stand out in all the right ways.
Beautifully said. And actually, we have the chat boxes lighting up here. So
I can see that.
Steph, just how do we connect with you if we want to continue this conversation when we finish the chat and learn here? Because I know folks are writing in the chat box that they would love to see some examples of the statements that you're speaking about, maybe some before or after samples. It sounds like maybe they also might want to work with you and show some things that they've been working on. How should we best approach reaching out to you, Steph?
Yeah. So right now, my availability, I only work with a couple clients a week. So the best way to get help through, especially with your resume, would be through my resume rescue workshop. And I'm actually going to share some slides on that here. If you want to go to the next one, I can kind of talk a little bit about that. But my website is offtheclockresumes.com. You can explore the different options that I have for working with me. But like I said, my availability is limited to take on one-on-one done for you resume client work. So the resume rescue workshop is really the absolute best alternative to working one-on-one with a resume writer. In this workshop, you learn how to create interview-worthy resumes in less than a day that will get through applicant tracking systems and in front of hiring decision makers. I created this workshop to take the guesswork out of resume writing so that you don't have to rely on a resume writer to advance in your career. I see this happen all the time. I have someone who wants to work with me and then they go, well, now I want to apply for something else. They don't necessarily want to have to rely on a professional. And this is a very teachable skill. Resume writing is not rocket science. It's just a new way of looking at your background. So that's why I created this workshop. Next slide. So the great thing about this workshop is that for International Update Your Resume Month in September, I am giving up to 60% off discount on the workshop at offtheclockresumes.com resume rescue workshop. And you guys are actually the first to hear about this promotion. So you guys get first dibs on these discount codes. There are limited availability for these discounts, but no matter what, the resume rescue workshop will be up to 25% off no matter what all month. But these other huge discounts, 60% off, 50% off, 40% off, you guys are getting first dibs on these discounts. We'll leave those up, but can you go to the next slide? Now, what the Resume Rescue Workshop really is it's a proven resume writing system. And you're going to learn more or less how to align your career story with what recruiters and hiring decision makers want to see. Because I realize everyone's story is different and your background is unique to you, but we can reframe it around what those recruiters and hiring decision makers are really looking for in a way that's still authentic to your story. You're also going to learn how to present yourself as the best fit for the job that you want instead of the jobs that you've had, and ultimately land the interviews that you deserve. Next slide, please. So this workshop guides you through the exact same process that I have refined over the years and that has helped my done for you targeted resume clients land interviews in a matter of days and job offers in less than 60 days, even as few as 2 weeks. And this is workshop is typically only $97. And again, you can get up to 60% off with this limited time discount code. And again, this promotion is running all month long. Next slide, and I'll tell you what you get in the workshop. So the workshop itself includes applicant tracking software friendly, easy to edit modern resume templates. So these are literally fill in the blank templates that I have designed to get through applicant tracking systems. They look great. They are modern, minimalistic style that recruiters and hiring managers respond very well to. And I've designed them for various career levels. So there's a college edition, career change edition, mid-career edition, and a tech edition. And that kind of is based on the type of layout that is going to best present your background for these different career levels. And every template comes with 8 different color schemes. So you're not stuck with just one look. You can kind of pick and choose what's going to really align with your personal brand, which I touch a lot on in the Resume Rescue Workshop, what personal branding is and how to convey that into your resume using color psychology. The workshop also includes worksheets and a 70-minute on-demand video lesson. Now, this is where I give you all of those examples. I cover a ton of examples with actual client projects where we walk through how to build a branding statement. We walk through how to create those micro stories for your experience section. Those worksheets are going to help you do that. And again, I walk you through in this video lesson how to utilize these worksheets. And then when you finish the workshop, this is the best part. You actually get a resume review with minor edits to polish it up by yours truly. So I am actually looking at your resume. I'm just not doing it from scratch for you. You're developing these resume writing skills yourself, and then you're getting feedback from me to make sure you're on the right track and maybe give you some additional tips and tricks. But the workshop itself is so full of good tips, tricks, and insights. We cover a lot about applicant tracking systems, how they work and what they're looking for, but in a way that's very digestible and doesn't feel so overwhelming. Next slide, please. So again, you don't want to miss the opportunity to get such big savings on the Resume Rescue Workshop. Again, it's retail price $97, but you can get up to 60% off using these discount codes for the month of September at offtheclockresumes.com/resume rescue workshop. If you have any questions about the workshop, I'm happy to answer those as well. But let's move into the Q&A because I know there's a lot of questions that we're going to cover, but you could definitely shoot me questions also through Instagram, Facebook. I'm also on Pinterest at offtheclockresumes.com. So all of the social media sites, I'm there at Off the Clock Resumes.
Beautiful. Mic drop. So much information. I love the way that you've set up the workshop. And so I hope that we had folks asking questions just about, speaking with you or seeing examples. So hopefully that was encouraging enough to continue the conversation when we finish. Yes, feel free to take a sip of your coffee and water. You've been speaking a lot, dropping a lot of knowledge. Folks are saying that this has been very helpful. And someone even said they're going to rewatch this on YouTube to take notes there. I do want to hold for a light pause to see if someone wants to hop off of mute to voice their own question or reflection here with Steph now. Otherwise, I will read what's in the chat chat box and what you all have submitted offline, but I want to give priority to anyone who wants to hop off. So I'll hold for a light pause. If you feel called to do so, hop off mute and go for it.
Please do. If you don't mind, I am going to just say really quickly, I see in the comments, someone said they have the workshop in their shopping cart. Once it's in your shopping cart, you click checkout. There should be a promo code box or a discount code box on the actual checkout page. Should be right below where the actual pricing is for it on the checkout page. So, oh, you rock too.
Awesome. Done and done. Great. So we've got a little over 15 minutes left. So I'm going to read some questions here. I see that some of them are correlating with some of the questions in the chat box. So let's talk about filling in gaps in your resume. So this question was previously submitted, and then someone else had a question here live that has to do with that. So again, if this was your question that you submitted previous to the chat, let us know that you're here. I'm trying to fill a gap in my resume. Is it okay to combine volunteer activity along with research work done pro bono into one current role? If not, how can I still mention those experiences?
Yes. So if you are applying for non-government jobs, you have a lot of flexibility with your resume. Remember, it's a sales or it's a marketing tool. So you want to highlight your top selling points in a way that is very digestible for someone who's skimming a document quickly. So yes, you can get creative with some of your non-formal work experiences where you could describe yourself as a consultant, or you can describe yourself as project manager, as however you want to go about describing yourself. And yes, you can definitely summarize that experience to fill in those gaps. I know there are a lot of people who have taken time off, some who didn't have a choice in the matter because of COVID. There's a lot of people with different types of gaps. My best advice to you is try to fill that gap as best you can. So whether that's a short 1 or 2 liner saying that you took time off to take care of a sick parent, that you took time off for family, for travel, the best thing you can do is try to focus in on the transferable skills that you utilize during that time. So for example, again, I gravitate towards project manager, but say you took some time off to take care of your house. Or your family members, kids, or a sick parent. You have budget management experience that you used at home. You have project coordination experience that you used at home because you're coordinating all these activities, all these people all the time. So if you can focus on transferable skills, that will help, fill that gap without elaborating on a lot of detail that's not going to be relevant.
Beautiful. And we've got actually specific examples here. And just for the sake of time, I won't go through everyone's examples. Thank you all for sharing your journey here. So hopefully Steph's advice on how to speak to the gap that you have is reaching out to you all. If not, please drop in the chat box. But there is one that speaks about kind of the combining of the gap and the out of date, let's say beyond 15 experience references. How would you, if that person has taken a 7+ gap, but before that, it looks like between 1997 and 2007, they were working in a big aerospace company. How do they kind of fill that gap, but also speak to the time frame from their recent work?
Yeah, if you can summarize older experience without adding in the dates in a really brief career note or additional experience note, that's going to be far more strategic for you. So you can add in the experience that is going to be most relevant, and especially those highlights of achievements that are going to really pop compared to your most recent experience. What I will say to that, though, is again, employers are still going to be more concerned with how you spent your last 10 to 15 years. So if you can focus on transferable skills, any additional training or education that you got during that time, reframing your background as more of an entry-level candidate can actually move you through the hiring process faster than relying on that older 20+ years of experience. So while that may sound really harsh, that's just the nature of how hiring works. There are employers who are going to look at older experience and they're going to say, okay, well, they can do that, but it's not going to weigh as heavily as the experience that you or how you present yourself now, and being more forward thinking than really just being stuck in what you've done 20+ years ago. So it's all about reframing your background in a way that is going to be more strategic and be more forward thinking. So again, I have done that in the past where I've added like a additional experience section where we summarize that older experience. We don't add any dates, and that has been really successful for my clients.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's move on to this next question that was submitted previously, and then I'm going to tie in another question to that that someone has written in the chat box. Do you have to adjust your resume for each job you apply for? How do you best manage balancing the changes made to an application while not spending all of your time on making so many changes? And I just want to piggyback this question here that was written in the chat box live. Any tips on narrowing your target so you don't look like you're trying everything? So if you have multiple opportunities, maybe not overwhelming the hiring manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that's a great question because what I call the spray and pray method of applying for jobs does not work, especially when you're applying for jobs online. So, what some of my clients have done is narrowed it down to 3 job targets, and they have a targeted resume for each of those different jobs. And then they can tweak each one for different applications as needed. I do not recommend trying to apply and position yourself for any and everything. Your message is going to get so muddled if you are trying to be. One of the things I've been telling my clients is if you try to be everything to everyone, you won't be the right person for anybody. So you've got to try to narrow in on what you bring to the table, what your ideal next role is. Even if that doesn't match your background, but that is your ideal next role, go all in on that role and make sure that you're positioning yourself on your resume, on a cover letter, online, in conversations you have with people in your network so that you are positioned as the best fit for that job, even if there might be another role that's out there that's better for you. Another thing I've noticed is career transition and exploration coaching can be very helpful to job seekers. Now, that may seem like one more thing that they have to, get help with, but honestly, again, it comes back to if you are spraying and praying, you are not going to get responses. Your job search is going to last just that much longer. And you're going to confuse the heck out of employers because they know you don't know what you want. You don't know what you bring to the table. So it's very important that that is the first thing that you do. If you have multiple if you're applying for different roles with different goals, again, it comes back down to goals. If the goals are different, have a different resume for each type of role that you're applying for. And then you can make minor tweaks to each of those resumes when you're applying for those jobs online. And again, to make it simple, go back to what are the goals of the role, rework that branding statement. What are the top skills that ATS will be looking for? Add those to your skills section. If you're applying for similar enough roles, you shouldn't have to create brand new micro stories demonstrating your skills and abilities for every single application. Those should be pretty easily refined.
I love that spray and pray. It's so clear. It's like, cause it's like maybe in a rush, it's something that you have an aversion to. You don't even want to touch the resume or, you want to try to have more time in your day so that you don't have to work. And then, looking for work or re-updating everything is also another full-time job sometimes. So we just want to spray and pray. I love that.
I want to add really quickly too. One of the biggest disconnects with why job seekers don't land the jobs that they want is they're making their job search all about them. And it's very easy to do, but you've got to start thinking about your job search from an employer's perspective, from a recruiter and a hiring manager's perspective. Their job is to fill one role as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, and with someone who's going to stay, so they're not going to do it again shortly after. So you got to think in terms of what are they looking for? How do I rework my background, my unique career story to align with what they're looking for? And what do they need to find quickly so that I'm bumped up on that list to get an interview? So if you think in the terms of what an employer is looking for, how a recruiter goes about their job and what their top goals are within their own role, that's going to help you tweak your resume that much faster and get your foot in the door that much faster. You just got to change your perspective.
Yes, all the time. Change our perspectives all the time. I think that would just help us be better citizens of the world in general. And speaking of, we've got about 8 minutes left. So I would love to hear, I love this question that was submitted previous. Are there any recent resume trends that you find intriguing or concerning?
I was really hoping I'd get this type of answer because My biggest concern is trends that are adding more bias and discrimination to the job search than there already is. And this is something that I mean, I even did a training last year in the conference on gender bias in resume writing that you don't even realize, job postings are using certain words to attract women to apply versus men. And it's a whole other thing. But some of the trends that really do concern me are, for example, adding pronouns to a resume. I understand that that is really important to people. But, your gender or what you identify as doesn't matter to whether or not you can perform the job. So that right there is opening yourself up to some level of bias or discrimination. Adding whether or not you're vaccinated to your resume is another thing I'm hearing about that is just not the place for it. There are certain companies that are going to ask it in an application, and an application is different than a resume. But as far as a marketing document that is presenting you as the best fit for the job, that is another form of bias and discrimination you're adding to your resume that you just don't need working against you. Another one is like TikTok resumes. That one really concerns me. That's a big one where video resumes are becoming more popular, especially on TikTok and Snapchat. And I think that's great for the people who are very creative and very outgoing, but it doesn't help those who are going to present themselves as the best fit in a much more maybe introverted way. It's adding that visual element that can really help those who are extremely attractive and really bubbly and creative and those who have no problem standing out, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the best fit for the role. So that's another level of bias that we're adding into the job search that doesn't need to be there. And these are some trends that are really popular right now that are really concerning to me.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. I know, I mean, it's very important that we speak clearly about these situations. I mean, on a whole nother conversation, I would love to ask your opinion just about, machine learning and artificial intelligence in this process. I interviewed a beautiful woman in Kenya recently who her whole conversation was about is AI discriminatory, and they have found so many studies that it is. So we are in some really pivotal times, and if we aren't raising these questions and speaking about them together, and asking professionals like you, what do you see that's concerning or not? And I definitely it's interesting to chew on, because as we do want to show our true selves, maybe the system isn't, I mean, we want to hope that we're ready, but maybe that can call a red flag, and maybe they want to, you to be the token person as you're identifying, or, they need more women, they need more non-binary people, they need more XYZ, and that is kind of feeding into that tokenism that is not healthy anyway. So thank you so much for highlighting your concerns. All right, so we've got about 4 minutes left. Let's see, from what I heard you mention about dates, there is age bias. What if one is in a later stage or life? So can you speak a little bit more about ageism in a resume?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the greatest indicators of of your age on your resume are the dates that you're adding. For the longest time, it was, don't add any dates after 2000, so 90s and on. And then it was, don't add your high school. And again, it comes back to, um, a lot of, I actually work with a majority of older clients. Many of my clients are over 55, and they're looking at either their last role before retirement, or some of them are even coming out of retirement and trying to, just get back into work after a break. So I'm very familiar with working with older clients, and what I've noticed is there is this attachment to their older experience that is not helping them, and it doesn't show that they're forward thinking. And that is what employers are most concerned about with older candidates: is are they going to be manageable? Is there going to be a compatibility issue? Are they going to stick around? Because then it comes back down to, hiring quickly, hiring cheaply, and hiring someone who's going to stick around so they don't have to start the process all over again. What I found with, ageism is making sure that you are being forward thinking. You're showing that you embrace technology. You're showing that, yes, that older experience is important, but the dates don't matter, because really what's more important is the last 10 to 15 years. Making sure that Again, the emphasis is on the goals of the role and not so much of what you've done. I think a lot of my older clients really struggle to take, skills and experience and tasks and responsibilities and translate that into business impact because again, it's a generational gap as far as what a resume used to be and what a resume is now. So there are definitely a lot of elements that come into, taking the qualifications away from or taking the focus away from your qualifications and drawing negative attention to your age. You've just got to try to use your resume as a forward thinking marketing tool, not so much as that biography.
Absolutely. So well said. Thank you so much, Steph. We've got about 2 minutes left. I would love for you to leave us with some food for thought. You've already covered so much. And for those who have questions that we didn't get to, again, please let us know how we can connect with you on your website or via LinkedIn, whatever your preferred way of connecting is, so that if they continue to have questions, they can reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am on LinkedIn, Steph Cartwright, CPRW. Feel free to send me a connection request. Please add a note to it so I know that you are reaching out because you have a question or because of attending this chat and learn. I'm going to try to get to them as quickly as I can. I've actually been inundated with LinkedIn messages lately, so I'm a little behind in getting to people, but I will get to you as soon as I can. I'm also on Instagram. That's another way. And again, I'm a little behind in answering DMs, but I will get to you as soon as I can to answer your question. A lot of these questions, especially towards resume writing, can be answered with examples in the Resume Rescue Workshop, as I've shared. But if you're not sold on it yet, you can take a peek at what is going on in the Resume Rescue Workshop with my free 5-day Resume Rescue Challenge. So this is an email challenge. Every day we cover something, whether it's resume design tips, personal branding. There's also examples in that as well. You can find that at offtheclockresumes.com/challenge. And again, it's free. Sign up. You'll get the first challenge right away for making updates to your resume's appearance. And it goes on beyond that as well. So those are some ways to reach out to me. I don't know if you want to go on a little bit longer, I am totally available to do so, but that's up to you.
Yeah, I would love to respect everyone's time. I know we said we'd stop right now at the hour. So I encourage folks to reach out to Steph via the ways that she said now, and obviously practicing patience with responding on social medias. I know that it can be overwhelming. And so I think that as we are all finding ways to network and connect and just, share stories, that patience is key as we continue to do this. So I support you there, Steph. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We hope to have you back again. This is such an important topic, and I really appreciate your perspective. Folks are singing your praises in the chat box as well. So good luck, everyone. We encourage you, bring your best selves to the table. You could do this. If you have any doubts, reach out to Steph and she can guide you more with her beautiful light. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the next Chat and Learn.